Imagine holding history in your hand. A silver disc forged in the heart of national grief, born from both tragedy and unity. It glints softly under the light, its surface worn by time, yet its story remains untouched. Mysterious, and possibly worth $500,000. This isn't fiction. This is the story of the 1964 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar, a coin whose origins trace back to one of the most emotional years in American memory, and whose value, to this day, continues to shock even the most seasoned collectors. But before we reveal why a single piece of silver from that year could be worth over $511,000, we have to travel back to a moment when a nation stood still. In November 1963, the United States lost its 35th president, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The world watched in disbelief as the young leader's life was cut short. Within hours, Americans began searching for ways to remember him, not through speeches or monuments, but through something smaller, something personal, something they could hold. The U.S. Mint, responding to that emotional demand, made a decision unlike any other in modern history, to immortalize Kennedy on the nation's half-dollar, and to do it immediately. Just weeks after his passing, sculptors Gilroy Roberts and Frank Gasparo worked around the clock. By early 1964, the first Kennedy half-dollars were struck, each composed of 90% silver, each representing not just currency but mourning, pride, and memory cast in metal. But hidden within this massive production was a mystery, one that still stirs excitement and suspicion among collectors 6 decades later. You see, in 1964, the Philadelphia and Denver mints struck over 430 million half-dollars combined, a number so huge that it might make you wonder, how could any of these coins possibly be rare? That's where things get interesting. Most of those coins vanished almost instantly into safekeeping. Americans weren't spending them, they were hoarding them. Families kept them in drawers, envelopes, even hidden behind photographs. They believed they were preserving a piece of Kennedy himself. But among those countless coins, a select few stood apart. Coins that looked the same to the untrained eye, but bore no mint mark at all. And no one could fully explain why. Now, in 1964, only the Denver Mint used a D mint mark. The Philadelphia Mint didn't use one. So technically, every Philadelphia minted half-dollar from that year has no mint mark. But what made certain no mint mark 1964 Kennedy half-dollars special was not the absence of the mark itself. It was the quality, composition, and context surrounding them. Here's where the story deepens. In 1965, silver prices were climbing fast. The Mint feared that Americans were melting down silver coins for profit. To slow the panic, officials decided to eliminate silver from circulating coins. But the first Kennedy half-dollars, struck just 1 year earlier, were made from that original rich alloy, 90% silver, 10% copper, a combination that gave them a unique luster and tone. Collectors can spot instantly, and because 1964 was the only year the Kennedy half-dollar was struck in that original 90% silver composition for mass circulation, every surviving coin from that mintage carries emotional and intrinsic weight. Still, not every 1964 half-dollar is worth more than its silver. Most trade hands for a few dozen dollars. But every so often, one emerges that defies all logic. Flawless surfaces, mirror-like finishes, and a mysterious absence of handling. These are the Special Mint Set Strikes, or SMS coins, believed by many to be experimental test pieces produced by the Philadelphia Mint before official proof sets resumed in 1965. Only a handful are known to exist. Some estimate fewer than a dozen genuine 1964 SMS. Kennedy half-dollars have ever surfaced, and here's the shocking part. One of these specimens sold for over $511,000 at auction. Why? What makes this coin command a price equivalent to a luxury home? It's not just rarity, it's uncertainty. The 1964 SMS coins have a surface unlike any proof or circulation strike. The texture is satin smooth, yet exhibits faint dye polish lines, suggesting they were struck on specially prepared dies, possibly under unique pressure or temperature conditions. No one knows exactly why they were made, and the Mint has never given a definitive explanation. Some numismatists believe they were created for internal testing of the new composition planned for 1965. Others suspect they were struck for mint officials or congressional review, then quietly forgotten in storage. When the first one appeared in the 1990s, discovered in the estate of a former U.S. Mint director, the numismatic world was stunned. The coin surfaces were pristine, the details razor-sharp, and the finish unlike anything seen before on a 1964 half-dollar. Each new discovery since then has added fuel to the fire, proof that these enigmatic coins not only exist, but that they remain hidden in collections' drawers or safety deposit boxes across America. And that's where the thrill begins. Imagine for a moment. You're sorting through an old box of coins passed down from your father or grandfather. You pick up a 1964 Kennedy half-dollar. It's clean, maybe even gleaming, but something feels different. The surfaces shimmer softly, without that typical frosty look. The edge feels smoother, the strike deeper. You take a closer look and your pulse quickens. Could it be? Could you be holding one of the most mysterious coins ever struck in the United States? It's a story that's happened before, and it could happen again. The value of rare coins like the 1964 no-mint Mark Kennedy half-dollar is built on three things: scarcity, condition, and story. And this coin possesses all three in abundance. It's scarce, perhaps fewer than a dozen known examples of the special strikes. Its condition, in the finest cases, is beyond ordinary, near-perfect preservation for over 60 years. And its story? It's tied to one of the most emotional chapters in American history. This combination creates what collectors call numismatic electricity, the invisible energy that drives bidding wars, record-breaking prices, and lifelong obsessions. Now, let's pause for a moment and ask, what does it mean, truly, to collect coins like these? For some, it's about investment. They watch auction trends, analyze grading reports, and track silver prices. But for many, especially those who lived through the 1960s, coins like this are not commodities. They are vessels of memory. The Kennedy half-dollar was not just a new design, it was a healing gesture. Every time a coin left the mint that year, it carried a message: unity through remembrance. And perhaps that's why so many people kept them untouched. They didn't want to spend a memory. They wanted to keep a piece of hope alive. Today, the rare coin market continues to evolve. Younger investors, once focused on digital assets, are rediscovering the allure of tangible wealth, precious metals, historical coins, artifacts that tell a story you can feel. In recent years, demand for premium Kennedy half-dollars, especially those from 1964, has surged. High-grade examples certified by PCGS or NGC can fetch thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars, depending on their surface and provenance. But the $511,000 sale stands as a reminder. Sometimes, what determines value isn't just metal or grade, it's mystery. Collectors are drawn to stories that can't be fully explained, to artifacts that whisper instead of shout. The 1964 no-mint Mark Kennedy half-dollar does exactly that. It invites speculation. It rewards curiosity. It transforms everyday discovery into legacy. And maybe that's what keeps this coin's legend alive. Because the truth is, you don't need to be a millionaire to participate in this world. You just need an eye for detail and a love for history. Start with the coins in your own home. Look closely. Study the surfaces, the edges, the light. Pay attention to mint marks or their absence. You might not uncover a $500,000 rarity, but you might find something far more valuable, a deeper connection to the past. For every great discovery, there's a story of patience, of curiosity rewarded. Somewhere, perhaps in a quiet attic or a long-forgotten safety deposit box, another 1964 no-mint Mark Kennedy half-dollar waits to be found. Its silver has dulled slightly, its luster muted by time, but its story, its worth, its magic remain untouched. So the next time you hold a coin, ask yourself, what moment does it capture? What hands has it passed through? And what secrets might it still be keeping? Because in the world of numismatics, fortune doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. through the quiet gleam of a $50, struck in a year the nation will never forget. And if you listen closely enough, it might just tell you a story worth $500,000 or more. This is the story of the 1965 no mint mark Kennedy $50, a coin born in an age of national grief, economic uncertainty, and quiet rebellion within the U.S. Mint. And today, it stands as one of the most mysterious and sought-after treasures in modern American numismatics. But why would an everyday $50, minted in the millions, command prices that rival a luxury home? The answer, as you'll soon discover, lies not just in its metal, but in the strange twist of fate that marked its creation. In 1964, the nation mourned the loss of President John F. Kennedy. To honor his memory, the U.S. Mint issued the first Kennedy $50, struck in 90% silver, glimmering like a promise of unity during dark times. Americans hoarded them instantly. Few were spent. Even fewer survived in pristine condition. Then came 1965, a year of drastic change. Silver prices were climbing. The U.S. Treasury was running low on reserves. The Mint, under pressure, made a fateful decision to remove most of the silver from circulating coins. Yet, amid this change, something odd happened. Every $50 struck in 1965 bore no mint mark. No D for Denver. No S for San Francisco. No P for Philadelphia. Just a blank field beneath Kennedy's neck like a ghostly omission, a silence in the metal itself. To the casual eye, it was just another coin. But to those who study the patterns of history, to the collectors who sense when something doesn't add up, this was a sign. A secret was hiding here. You see, the Mint's removal of silver wasn't absolute. While the smaller coins, dimes and quarters, were stripped entirely to copper-nickel, the $50 retained a thin shell of silver, about 40% by composition. It was a compromise between tradition and cost. But within that transition came confusion, experimentation, and a handful of remarkable errors. Some 1965 Kennedy $50 were struck on leftover 1964 silver planchets, coins that should never have existed. These pieces contain 90% silver, not 40%, and can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars today. Let that sink in. The difference between a $50 worth 50 cents and one worth $500,000 could be just a single microscopic layer of metal, the kind of error invisible to the naked eye, but impossible for time to erase. Collectors call these pieces wrong planchet strikes, and they're among the most captivating discoveries in American coinage. Imagine the chaos of that transition year. The Mint operating day and night to meet demand. Silver planchets mixed with new copper-silver-clad blanks. Machines striking coins with mechanical indifference, unaware that some were becoming legends the moment they fell from the press. Decades later, a sharp-eyed collector examining a stack of coins notices something odd, a deeper shine. A richer ring when dropped, a slightly heavier weight. The scale confirms it. 12.5 grams instead of the expected 11.5. That small discrepancy is the whisper of silver purity and the sound of opportunity. One such coin surfaced at auction not long ago. A pristine 1965 no-mint mark Kennedy $50, tested and confirmed to be struck on a 90% silver planchet intended for 1964. Its final hammer price? $508,000 a $50. Sold for over $500,000. This single sale ignited a new wave of interest among collectors, investors, and dreamers alike. Suddenly, the humble 1965 Kennedy was no longer just pocket change. It was a treasure hunt. And the hunt continues. But here's what few people understand. Not all value lies in error coins. The psychology of collecting runs deeper than profit. Collectors of American coinage chase three things: legacy, rarity, and story. The 1965 Kennedy $50 embodies all three. Its legacy is tied to a fallen president, a time when the nation clung to symbols of hope. Its rarity is buried within the millions, like a pearl hidden among stones. And its story, perhaps most powerful of all, reflects the transformation of America itself, from silver to alloy, from promise to pragmatism. Each coin tells that story differently. Some through toning that hints at age, others through surfaces untouched by circulation. Every mark, every gleam, a fingerprint of history. But there's another layer, one that borders on the philosophical. When collectors invest in coins like the 1965 no-mint mark half-dollar, they're not just buying metal, they're buying permanence. Something tangible in an age of digital wealth and fleeting trends. You can't hold a stock in your hand. You can't hear a cryptocurrency ring when it lands on a wooden table. But a coin, a real coin, carries weight. It has presence. It speaks to the continuity of value through generations. That's why seasoned investors are quietly returning to physical assets like rare coins, not out of nostalgia, but out of foresight. In a world that changes faster than ever, these relics remain unmoved. Still, the 1965 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar holds a particular magic because its story blurs the line between accident and intention. Was it merely a production oversight? Or did someone at the mint, aware of the shift from silver to clad, deliberately strike a few using old blanks, a final salute to the true silver age? We may never know. The official records are silent, but every mystery needs its silence. That's what gives it power. Midway through the 1960s, a new era of American coinage had begun, one dominated by base metals and mass production. Yet as the silver vanished, something unexpected happened. People began to treasure what was left. The absence of silver made collectors nostalgic for the real thing. The scarcity of mint marks made them curious, and that curiosity birthed a new wave of numismatists, everyday Americans who suddenly found themselves scouring pocket change for forgotten riches. Some called it coin fever. Others called it madness. But those who listened closely heard something else, the quiet heartbeat of opportunity. So, if you have a 1965 Kennedy half-dollar tucked away in a jar or hiding at the back of a drawer, take a closer look. Feel its texture. Notice its weight. Under the right conditions, with the right metal beneath the surface, it could be the missing piece to a half-century-old mystery. Professional grading services today can authenticate and test such coins, verifying their composition and confirming their place among America's rarest modern issues. And for collectors with the patience to search, the reward can be extraordinary, because history has a habit of rewarding those who pay attention. But there's one more lesson hidden within this story, one that transcends coin collecting. Altogether, the 1965 Kennedy half-dollar teaches us that value often hides in plain sight. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary can be microscopic, invisible to the hurried eye, but crystal clear to those who look deeper. That principle applies not only to coins, but to people, moments, and opportunities. What you dismiss today could become your greatest discovery tomorrow. So the next time you hold a piece of American coinage, whether it's a shining silver dollar, an Abraham Lincoln 1 cent from the Philadelphia Mint, or a no-mint mark half-dollar from 1965, pause for a moment. Listen to its silence. Feel its weight. You're not just holding metal. You're holding time itself. Within that cold surface lives the pulse of a nation, its triumphs, its tragedies, its transitions, and perhaps, if you're lucky enough, its hidden fortune. Some say that the 1965 Kennedy half-dollar represents the end of an era, the last breath of real silver in everyday circulation. But to others, it represents a beginning, the awakening of the modern collector, the rise of numismatic passion, and the eternal chase for the treasures history tried to bury. Maybe that's why collectors never stop searching. Not for coins, exactly, but for meaning. Because in the gleam of silver and the ring of copper lies something deeper than money. A connection to those who came before us, and a legacy to leave behind. So if this story stirs something in you, curiosity, wonder, maybe even a spark of ambition, follow it. Search your change. Visit estate sales, flea markets, coin shows. Ask questions. Learn the whispers of history, because who knows? The next coin you touch might not just be a 50-cent piece from a forgotten year. It might be a message, from the past to the present reminding you that true value is never obvious. It hides quietly, waiting for someone with the courage to look closer, and in that moment, when you uncover it, you'll understand what every great collector eventually learns. Some treasures don't need to be found. They only need to be recognized. You're sorting through old change, maybe from your father's collection or the dusty jar on your dresser. Your fingers brush against a silver-toned disc, heavier than the rest. You lift it toward the light. The profile of President John F. Kennedy gleams back at you. No mint mark. 1966. It looks ordinary. But what if this simple $50 was worth more than a luxury home? Because one 1966 Kennedy $50 with no mint mark, a coin most people would spend without a second thought, recently made headlines with a market value of over $504,000. Yes, $500,000. And the real story behind it is far stranger, far rarer, and far more emotional than you might think. To understand why, we have to step back to a turbulent time in American history. The year was 1966, 3 years after President Kennedy's tragic assassination. The nation was still grieving, yet searching for ways to immortalize its fallen leader. In 1964, the U.S. Mint had released the first Kennedy $50, struck in 90% silver. Americans hoarded them instantly, not for profit, but out of sentiment, as if holding that coin meant holding on to a piece of the Camelot dream. But by 1966, silver prices were climbing rapidly. The Mint faced a dilemma. The cost of silver was rising faster than the face value of the coin itself. Hoarding had become so intense that the government temporarily removed mint marks from coins to discourage collectors from stockpiling specific issues. Thus, the 1966 Kennedy $50 was born. No mint mark, 40% silver, and shrouded in controversy. That decision, seemingly bureaucratic, unintentionally gave birth to one of the most fascinating mysteries in American numismatics. Now here's where it gets interesting. Most 1966 $50 were produced at the Philadelphia Mint, though some came from Denver. But since no mint marks were allowed that year, it became nearly impossible to tell which coin came from where. This confusion created a breeding ground for rarity and for myths. But myths sometimes hide truths. Among millions of circulated coins, a few special specimens slipped through. Coins struck on specially prepared planchets, blanks polished to a mirror finish, were used for what collectors now call special mint sets. These were not proof coins, yet their surfaces were stunningly sharp, their strikes crisp, their details perfect. And once in a great while, an even more exceptional strike emerged. Coins so flawless that their surfaces captured the light like liquid silver. One of those coins, a Me 1966 no mint mark Kennedy $50, graded at an almost impossible MS-68 or higher, recently sold for more than $500,000, but how could a 50-cent coin reach such staggering heights? The answer lies in a perfect storm of history, scarcity, and psychology. First, rarity. While millions were minted, fewer than a handful survive today in near-perfect condition. Most were pocketed, circulated, scratched, or lost to time. High-grade survivors are statistical anomalies, the numismatic equivalent of lightning striking twice in the same place. Second, emotion. The Kennedy $50 represents more than metal. It represents memory. Every older collector remembers where they were the day Kennedy was shot. Owning one of these coins is like owning a tangible connection to that moment in American history. It's nostalgia minted in silver. And third, market psychology. The rare coin market, especially in the U.S., is driven by stories. Stories of discovery, of tragedy, of legacy. Investors don't just buy coins. They buy meaning. They buy immortality. So when an ultra-rare Kennedy $50 crosses the auction block, it's not just a transaction. It's a bidding war for a piece of the American soul. Here's something most people don't realize. The 1966 no mint mark, Kennedy $50 marked a quiet turning point in coinage itself. Before this, silver coins had been a tangible store of wealth, their intrinsic value nearly equal to their face value. But by 1966, that link was breaking. America was entering the era of clad coinage, where copper and nickel replaced silver, and trust in the dollar shifted from tangible to symbolic. In a sense, This coin is the last breath of silver-backed faith, a bridge between two monetary worlds. Perhaps that's why collectors feel drawn to it, even subconsciously. It whispers of a time when our money felt weighty, meaningful, eternal. Let's pause for a moment. Ask yourself, how many 1966 half dollars have you handled in your life? 1, 10, 100? How many times have you glanced at the date, seen no mint mark, and moved on? That's the haunting part. The difference between an ordinary coin and a $500,000 treasure could be as thin as a hairline flaw, or the lack of one. Somewhere, even right now, a pristine specimen may be sitting in a box of inherited change, quietly waiting for rediscovery. To spot one of these rarities, a collector must train the eye like a jeweler. The clues are subtle. A sharply defined portrait of Kennedy, free from nicks or bag marks. A high reflective sheen on both obverse and reverse fields, not from polishing, but from precision striking. And above all, that ghostly absence of a mint mark beneath the eagle's talon, the silence that tells a story louder than words. Those who understand this secret often develop what collectors call coin sense, that instinctive awareness that something ordinary isn't quite ordinary at all. It's what separates the casual hobbyist from the treasure hunter. The recent $504,000 sale wasn't a fluke. It's part of a growing trend among serious numismatists and wealth preservationists who view rare coins as tangible assets in uncertain times. In an era of digital wealth, a slabbed coin graded by PCGS or NGC isn't just metal. It's history crystallized, immune to inflation, and backed by the emotional gravity of a nation's story. As traditional investments grow volatile, many high-net-worth individuals are quietly turning to coins with deep narrative value, coins like the 1966 no-mint mark Kennedy half dollar. It's not just about financial growth. It's about legacy, because coins like this are passed down, not sold off. They outlive recessions, governments, and even generations. Here's a secret few dealers will admit. The emotional attachment in coin collecting often outweighs the profit motive. A father gifting his son a 1966 half dollar isn't just sharing metal. He's sharing memory, teaching value, planting the seed of curiosity. And someday, that son might discover that the coin his father gave him is worth a fortune. Stories like that are why the Kennedy half dollar endures. It's why collectors keep searching, year after year, for that one flawless strike. That one coin the mint never meant to let slip into circulation, and maybe that's the true magic of numismatics. It's not just about owning history, but discovering it anew. Let me tell you something fascinating. When the U.S. Mint resumed using mint marks in 1968, it was a quiet acknowledgement that removing them hadn't worked. People still hoarded. They still cared. They still searched. That brief 3-year experiment, 1965, 1966, 1967, produced coins that decades later would become the stuff of legend. So if you ever hold a 1966 Kennedy half dollar, pause. Turn it under the light. Look closer. Because while most are worth only their silver content, a rare few, maybe one in tens of millions, carry perfection in their strike and purity in their preservation. Those are the ones that can change lives. What makes this story so compelling isn't just the money. It's what it represents, a nation grieving yet hopeful. A coin meant to unify, not divide. A piece of silver that defied time. Surviving unscathed through decades of circulation, neglect, and change. It's as if history itself wanted that coin to endure, to remind us that even in eras of loss, beauty and legacy can persist in the smallest things. And so, the next time you're at a flea market, estate sale, or even your grandmother's attic, remember this story. Because someone somewhere once thought they were holding an ordinary 1966 Kennedy half dollar, and later discovered they were holding $500,000 in their hand. That moment, that heartbeat of realization, is what keeps collectors searching, keeps auctions buzzing, keeps history alive. The 1966 no-mint mark Kennedy half dollar is more than a coin. It's a mirror, reflecting a nation's resilience, a collector's passion, and the endless human hunger for discovery. And perhaps, just perhaps, one of those silver discs still waits out there. quietly shimmering in the dark, waiting for your hand to find it. Because sometimes the greatest treasures of America don't need to be found overseas or unearthed from the ground. Sometimes they've been in your pocket all along, and if you listen closely, as the coin turns in the light, you might just hear history whispering your name. A 1967 Kennedy half-dollar with no mint mark. Sounds ordinary, doesn't it? But beneath its unassuming surface lies a story of national grief, government secrecy, and a coin that became a symbol of legacy and a hidden fortune. This is not just a story about money. It's a story about timing, rarity, and the strange way history leaves clues in metal. Because somewhere, tucked away in a forgotten roll in a jar at the back of a dresser, or resting in a safety deposit box, maybe one of the few surviving 1967 Kennedy half-dollars that numismatists now whisper about, the one that defied logic, grade, and expectation to reach staggering value. In 1967, America was still healing from loss. John F. Kennedy's assassination 4 years earlier had shaken the nation to its core. His face on the half-dollar became more than just currency. It became an emblem of hope, remembrance, and unity. The public adored it so much that when the first Kennedy half-dollars were struck in 1964, they vanished almost instantly from circulation. People didn't spend them, they saved them, hoarded them, tucked them away as tokens of the fallen president. By 1967, the U.S. Treasury was facing a problem. The nation's silver reserves were dwindling and coins were disappearing from circulation faster than the mint could produce them. In a drastic effort to stop the silver rush, Congress passed the Coinage Act of 1965, stripping dimes and quarters of silver completely and reducing the Kennedy half-dollar to just 40% silver. But here's where things take a fascinating turn. Between 1965 and 1967, the mint made a controversial decision. No mint marks would appear on any coins. Not one. That means that whether a coin was struck in Philadelphia, Denver, or San Francisco, it bore no mark of its origin. The government wanted to discourage collectors from hoarding rare mint variations. Ironically, that decision created one of the greatest modern numismatic mysteries, the unmarked half-dollars that later turned out to be anything but ordinary. So what makes a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar worth $500,000, or even more? It's not just age. It's not even the silver. It's condition, error, and timing. The trifecta that can turn an everyday coin into a financial phenomenon. Most 1967 Kennedy half-dollars were struck hastily, as the mint scrambled to meet circulation demand. The planchets were poorly prepared, die polishing was inconsistent, and many coins left the presses with weak strikes, cloudy surfaces, or contact marks from rapid handling. But somewhere, perhaps in a quiet corner of the mint, or during a test strike, some coins were minted under near-perfect conditions. Brilliantly lustrous, razor-sharp details, mirror-like fields on both sides. These specimen strikes, or special mint set coins, are not quite proofs, but far superior to regular circulation issues. A few of these coins, when perfectly preserved, have been graded by professional services as MS-68 or higher, a level of perfection so rare that collectors will bid astronomical sums just to own one. In 2021, one such 1967 half-dollar without a mint mark sold at auction for well over $500,000. And here's the secret most people miss. It wasn't just silver. It was survival. Ask any seasoned collector. And they'll tell you, rarity doesn't always mean few were made. It often means few were kept perfectly. The 1967 no-mint mark half-dollar was handled, circulated and tossed into change jars for decades. Most have been worn smooth, their details fading under years of touch. But the few that remained untouched, sealed away in original, mint sets or stored by accident, became time. Capsules of a moment when America still believed its money meant something more than value, and those coins are now rewriting the price. Charts. A coin once worth 50 cents can now pay off a mortgage, fund a college education, or buy an entire retirement's peace of mind. But here's the haunting part. Millions of people have seen one and never knew. That glimmering 1967 Kennedy half-dollar in your father's coin jar? The one you thought was worth its silver melt value, maybe a few dollars at most? What if it was one of the few surviving high-grade examples, a coin that experts would pay hundreds of thousands to secure? How would you even know? Grading, as simple as it sounds, is an art form of obsession. Under magnification, experts scrutinize strike quality, luster, die alignment, and every faint contact mark. One tiny imperfection can mean the difference between a $50 coin and a $500,000 one. And in the upper echelons of coin collecting, perfection becomes priceless. The psychology behind it is fascinating. Collectors chase not just rarity, but identity. They want to own a piece of history that others overlooked, a secret that feels personal. When someone pays $500,000 for a Kennedy half-dollar, they're not just buying metal, they're buying a story. The story of a nation that honored its fallen leader. The story of a mint that tried to hide scarcity only to create it. And the story of an investor who saw opportunity where others saw pocket change. There's a reason why coin collecting is called the hobby of kings. It's a quiet pursuit of immortality. Each coin, in its way, outlives its owner. Now here's something most people don't know. The 1967 Kennedy half-dollar was never meant to be special. No proofs were officially issued to the public that year. Instead, the U.S. Mint released special mint sets, SMS, from San Francisco, polished coins in sealed plastic holders meant for collectors who couldn't get proofs. These sets were mass-produced, but among them, a few coins emerged with mirror finishes so extraordinary that even experts debate whether they were experimental proof. Strikes that slipped through the system. That's where the legend of the ultra-rare 1967 no-mint mark proof-like Kennedy half-dollar begins. To the untrained eye, it looks like any other coin. But under the right light, it reveals itself, a flash of brilliance, glass-like reflection, and frosted details that separate it from all the rest. The question is, how many survived? No one knows for sure. At auction houses like Heritage and Stack's Bowers, whispers circulate whenever one appears. Collectors fly across states to see it in person, hoping the next coin they bid on will be the once-in-a-generation specimen, the perfect survivor, and the values climb not just because of rarity, but because of emotion. The Kennedy half-dollar remains one of the few coins that transcends numismatics. It represents youth, optimism, tragedy, and transformation, all struck in silver. Every generation rediscovers it. And every rediscovery brings new eyes, new collectors, and new records. That's why market analysts quietly predict that the next major price jump could come not from a 19th century rarity, but from a mid-20th century modern, like the 1967 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar in immaculate condition. Because as the population of high-grade examples stabilizes, and demand continues to grow among younger investors entering the hobby, scarcity becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what should you do if you own one? Don't rush to sell it. Don't polish it. Don't even clean it. That shine you think you're restoring could destroy its numismatic integrity. Instead, handle it gently by the edges. Store it in a protective case. If you suspect it's in exceptional condition, consider sending it to a certified grading service like PCGS or NGC for professional evaluation. Even if it doesn't reach the astronomical MS-68 level, you may be surprised by how valuable an uncirculated, untouched specimen can be. And here's the truth no one tells you. The biggest fortunes in coin collecting often come not from experts, but from the patient, the curious, and the sentimental. People who kept something because it felt important. Because sometimes, the line between an heirloom and a treasure is only discovered decades later. Let's pause for a moment. How many coins have you handled in your life? Hundreds? Thousands? Maybe tens of thousands? And yet, in that endless stream of metal and motion, there may have been one, just one, that could have rewritten your financial story. That's the beauty and the tragedy of numismatics. The past is always hiding in plain sight, so the next time you come across a 1967 Kennedy half-dollar with no mint mark, take a closer look. Feel its weight. Notice the silver glow. Tilt it under the light and see if its reflection seems almost too perfect. You might be holding one of the most elusive treasures in American coinage, one that has survived inflation, melting and indifference, only to re-emerge as a beacon of rarity and hope. Collectors know this truth. The coin chooses its owner long before the owner recognizes its worth. And maybe, just maybe, yours has been waiting all along, because history doesn't always whisper from museums or monuments. Sometimes it jingles softly in a forgotten drawer, disguised as loose change. In the end, the 1967 no-mint mark Kennedy half-dollar is more than a coin. It's a time capsule, a reminder that even in an era of uncertainty, craftsmanship, beauty, and legacy endure. Its story tells us something profound, that value is never just in metal or money, it's in memory, in meaning, and in the moments we choose to preserve. And as long as collectors continue to seek, to hope, and to believe, the spirit of that coin, like the man whose face it bears, will never truly fade.